Welcome to Valina's Talk. Today I have a special guest and a friend, Tracy Shuchart. She has been already a guest during the first season of my digital talk, and there is no better time for this conversation on global energy transition, and there is no better guest than her for addressing these issues. Tracy Shuchart manages an energy and materials portfolio for a family office, and she's also the energy and materials strategist at Hedge Fund Telemetry. As you can guess, we are going to discuss anything important related to global energy transition in the next hour. It's a live stream, so you can also post your questions in the YouTube channel. And this conversation is possible due to the cooperation with Bharatvarta, which is one of India's most important and biggest podcast producers on policy and society. Welcome, Tracy.
Well, thank you for having me again.
Yes, and before we start with the first question, it is obviously quite of an exciting time. We are living right now. An energy crisis is basically affecting almost every part of the global right now, marked by record high energy prices, also tight supplies, and even power blackouts. Even here in Austria, in small, beautiful Austria, an island of the blast, scenario on blackouts has been published for the next 3 to 5 years. So some of the world's richest countries and of course United States, specifically some of the states within the United States, such as California, have been struggling already to keep their electricity systems stable. And here in Europe, we are experiencing a sharp surge of gas prices, electricity prices. In a sense, there is this feeling of urgency right now. So I would like you to first and foremost address this issue. Is it transitionary, the most favorite word by politicians and economists right now? Is it a transitionary phenomenon? Is this crisis here to stay? Is going to stay here for a longer period? What are the main drivers? What are the main triggers? And of course, what is your anticipation for the drivers of change beyond 2021 when it comes to the global energy supply and demand?
Well, I think for right now, no, this is not transitory, right? This second, this probably will be ongoing because you do have several countries coming out. They're already projecting energy problems within the future, and this starts actually, years ago. But before we gonna get into that, I kind of want to talk about some of the main drivers for change in 2021. I think there's like 5 main drivers that we're looking at right now. First was the longer term effects of COVID-19, which seems much less impactful, and we're recovering much faster. This is part of the problem, is that we weren't completely prepared for this. So that's one of the main issues. Second is power generation and power sources. Obviously, we're having an energy crunch, so we're trying to balance transition with traditional fossil fuels. But the problem is, what we're seeing is that you can't have wind and solar really as your base load because it's intermittent power. So really, that's what's going to be the main focus, is power generation and what power sources are we going to use moving forward. Then we also have economic forces, which are the investment flows. We have been severely lacking investment in fossil fuels without having the technology up to par of renewables to make this transition smooth. Then we also have political forces. Obviously, we have this push for the new green agenda. And then geographical forces, where, we're trying to have a one size fits all approach that's just not working across the globe. So those are the main areas of focus that I think that's going to be, 2021, and most of those and beyond.
So to translate it for those among the audience who are not energy experts, we should expect this kind of higher energy bills for at least the next 12 to 18 months, I suppose, or even longer in particular parts of the world which have been already witnessing the surge, right? I mean, because this is definitely not a short-term energy crisis because of those five groups of drivers that you've actually outlined.
Exactly. So, right now we're just looking at, honestly, just too few resources coupled with too much demand and trying to transition too fast without proper infrastructure in place. And that's really, that's rattling the energy world in Europe and Asia. And, we'll probably see a contagion beyond. And, it's showing us right now really the importance of energy security and the risk of giving up fossil fuels before alternatives are ready to pick up the slack.
Well, one major part of the narrative right now here on that part of the Atlantic, on that side of the Atlantic, is actually that the crisis should be tackled by increasing the share of renewables in the energy portfolio, which actually is contradiction in itself, because it would not be possible in such a short period of time. Or do I see it wrong, in a wrong
No,
way?
that's correct. It's just, there's just not enough time because the technology just isn't there yet, right? To make renewables for the masses, right? And commercially viable, because we're finding out what, we take UK, for example, what happens when, the wind doesn't blow or the sun doesn't shine, then you have intermittent power sources. And we saw this in Texas. We're seeing this in California as well. I mean, I'm not singling out UK, we're seeing this other places as well. So we're finding out that having intermittent power sources, you need to have something as a base load, right? And they're trying to phase out projects too quickly and shutting all the fossil fuel production down, or most of it, and completely shunning it without this technology up to par, and without the foresight of being able to blend these energies together so that you do have a stable power flow and power source to, power your country or state.
Mm-hmm. Yes, it's correct. In fact, one of the major reasons for the energy crisis in the UK was also indeed due to weak wind activities and due to the increased share of actually that specific energy source. So in a sense, it is a kind of an unanticipated effect from an accelerated energy transition. Could
Absolutely.
we see it that way? But the other side of the coin, of course, is also the question that I think is directly related to this, to the greening of the economies, specifically in the richest economies, because more or less currently it is about the G7 countries. It is more or less about the richest economies, which are on this pathway towards decarbonization, because countries such as China or India, many Asian countries, in fact, would not be able to decarbonize in the next 10 or 20 years, unless you see it probably in a different way. Of course, you can address this, but the other side of the coin is, are we going to witness also deindustrialization in the richest economies because of the fact that the green economy transition is going too fast, and in a sense, a lot of industries will not be able to cope with it. So basically, we are going to witness industries, companies going bust, industries tackling the energy crisis in a sense. Is it a beginning of a kind of a deindustrialization phase in the developed world?
I think so. I mean, well, here's the conundrum, right? So we had COVID, right? And we realized that, all of our supply chains were in a couple of nations. And that caused, a supply crisis across the world. And so after that, our lessons from that was, okay, let's bring supply chains home. Okay, that's great, except for now we run into the problem where nobody wants industrial production in their backyard, right? Because that requires a lot of fossil fuels, and that requires, that's heavily polluting. And even if you want to talk about, we need a ton of metals and minerals to even make these renewable resources like windmills and solar panels and whatnot. And then that requires mining, which is really dirty, and nobody wants that in their backyard. So they're going to have to find some sort of balance between, bringing in, do you want to bring supply chains closer to home so that we don't have this problem? We don't have everything just concentrated, say, in Asia, right? And where we're having a chip shortage and things like that. And we need to bring industry elsewhere. But then at the same time, you're going to have to deal with the sort of the dirty part of that industry, just because the technology isn't there to completely rely on renewables for these manufacturing processes.
Exactly. And speaking of world mining, as you said, a very important actually factor for the success of the green energy transition, and specifically when it comes to the use of electric cars in the future. Of course, the trend is very clear that the most of the world mining takes place in parts of the world such as Latin America or Africa, for instance, South Africa, Zambia, Congo, but definitely not in Europe. I mean, Europe has the least share, and USA as well. So you see how this actually makes rich countries once again being dependent on very important factors in the whole cycle. But of course, I would like to also put the focus on fossil fuels, and specifically, I would like to ask you what your anticipation is regarding the trends in this sector. What is, in your view, the most likely scenario for oil demand and supply by 2030? So let's take a short-term scenario. Now, I mean, one being beyond COVID-19 crisis, at least for the next year, and then moving towards 2030. Is the world really going to decarbonize as we are being told, or maybe only part of it? And what about the rest of the world? Where do you see actually an increase of oil supply in the world? I would stop here, and I have 4 more questions regarding fossil fuels, of course.
Okay, well, in the short term, right? So over the next year or so, we're probably going to see more of the same, where we're going to see increased fossil fuels. I mean, fossil fuels growth is supposed to increase out to 2030, but over the next year, what we're seeing is, because we have these high energy prices, in, say, natural gas, then we're seeing this, this gas to coal switching, gas to oil switching, right? Because they're a little bit more expensive, a little less expensive, but now those are running up as well. So the short term, we have a lot to sort out. I just don't see energy prices over the next year falling by any, huge significant degree. If we look over, the next 10 years, fossil fuel growth is, you're going to see, 3/4 of the expected fossil fuel growth comes from Asia Pacific, specifically Asia Pacific. So we're going to see a lot of growth out of there. Where India is expected to double over, the next over the next 5 years. We're going to see growth out of China. China actually just changed their 5-year plan very quietly to add more coal. And they said to vigorously pursue clean coal was the wording that they added in their 5-year plan, but they didn't really tell anybody about that. So we know that they're increasing, their coal consumption and going after it over the next 5 years. And Russia, as we know, they're busy in the Arctic, and they certainly have no plans of moving from, that area. They're, one of the largest gas and oil producers in the whole world. That demand is going to keep growing, whether or not, no matter what the West decides to do. And that's where you kind of run into the problem with these climate goals, right? It's because, nobody wants to spend 15% of their GDP for a 2% problem. So, there are scenarios saying that even if the entire Western world, the rich countries, cut their CO2 tomorrow and didn't have any CO2 emissions for the rest of the century, then you're only going to reduce temperatures by 2100 by 0.8 degrees. And that's way off the mark of the 1.5 that they're looking for. So that's just also something to consider when we're looking at these goals. And I think that what we're going to find at COP26, we're already seeing some of these countries sort of backtrack on a lot of things because of this current energy crisis.
Yes, as you have pointed out, the Asian giants, China and India, are energy hungry. They are not going to scale back. India is being en route to becoming a third major power in this or next decade. I can hardly imagine that they would actually decide to decarbonize in this particular phase of their economic developments. Right. When they actually want to catch up with China, they are in a direct conflict with China, and they need to speed up manufacturing and to actually, produce more. In a sense, it's not only about the oil, but also about the use of petrochemicals, right? So it's another side of the coin that we are used to so many products that are actually derived from oil. AES says decarbonization does not mean only exiting from oil. So in a sense, do you see also a positive trend in all the petrochemicals, all the oil-related products, because this is, of course, also important for the future.
Right. Well, exactly. So, and I think we talked about this a little bit. I kind of wanted to get into nat gas a little bit because we kind of talked about this last time that we had a conversation together. But, I think that natural gas is, I stressed this before, it's a great transition fuel. I think that it's going to be huge in the global energy portfolio. Especially in emerging markets where they just don't have, the $1 trillion funding for green projects, right? They need cheap, reliable energy sources so they can, catch up, right? So I think, that's really something that we should be looking at. And, we even had the EU in their green plan. They earlier this year decided, no, natural gas can't be in the energy portfolio. And then they backtracked on that and said, okay, we're going to include natural gas. So I think that's really only expected to grow. The biggest growth areas expected from 2020 to 2030 45 are Asia, which is 99%, Africa 147% growth, and Latin America 119% growth is what's expected. So with those kind of numbers out to 2045, fossil fuels just aren't going away.
Yes, and by the way, this is also verified and confirmed by all kind of energy macro outlooks that are being published by all relevant international organizations. It's not just a personal assessment, even OPEC, I mean, all of these kind of outlooks that are being produced each year and include also scenarios for 2030, 2040, 2050. There is no a single scenario that actually makes the case for net zero or transition or a complete decarbonization. And as you say, natural gas will be this kind of transitionary energy resource while moving away from oil. Do you see the same case, same scenario for liquefied natural gas? Do you include also LNG in that matrix? So it goes for both natural gas and LNG.
Yes, absolutely, and any of the liquids, propane, cooking gas, things of that nature. So NGLs, I would include in that bunch as well.
Mm-hmm. Do you see any kind of basically new natural gas or LNG reserves that can be explored in the near future? So basically new actors on the market unexpectedly arriving, so to say, among the old horses of oil and gas. Do you see any kind of new
yeah, I mean, I think
constellations?
Yeah, I'm sorry. Yeah, I mean, you have, you have Qatar, which is already big, but they're aggressive. They have the most aggressive plan ever laid out. Over the next 2 decades, they want to increase their gas production by 50%, which is huge. So, that's kind of the old guard. And then now, what's really interesting is, this Eastern Mediterranean bloc, right? So you have Israel on the market now. And then you're also seeing Egypt starting to auction off blocks. You just had Egypt, Greece, and Cyprus sign a deal to link power grids. Egypt has a deal already in place with Sudan, Libya, Jordan, and Saudi Arabia. That's next in their pipeline. And then other places where we're finding new players are Guyana, Tanzania, Egypt, Nambia, Mozambique. Brazil just found a big reserve of natural gas. Again, Israel, and then Russia in the Arctic. So there are a lot of sort of reserves that are being discovered and sort of sought after right now.
Yeah, so we're definitely moving from the age of scarcity towards the age of abundance, specifically when it comes to natural gas and LNG. And we discussed this last year. Now it's even more relevant than ever, I think. I mean, amid this energy crisis, is that one can only be bullish on actually on natural gas and on LNG. And even Pakistan is now actually in talks with Russia for a gas pipeline. I mean, just to give you an idea how diversified the world has become. If you're reading in the news why Pakistan is suddenly such an important regional actor, well, this is not a coincidence. There is always a kind of energy calculation behind it, or a kind of a energy relationship that is being in the making. And in this particular case, this is basically a new kind of relationship where Russia is becoming increasingly also an energy supplier in a region which is new terrain, right? So in a sense, this is definitely a trend that is here to stay. It is also very interesting, specifically in Europe. I would like to hear your opinion on that matter. When it comes to gas, there is a clear dependence, which has been now even further increased by, or basically dependence on one supplier, gas supplier, and that is Russia. And just yesterday, the Russian president announced that Russia could deliver 10% more gas to Europe, basically to Germany, if Nordstream II, which is a new pipeline, is approved by Germany. So, given that the surge of energy bills is quite high on the agenda at the current summit of the European Union member states. The timing is, of course, not coincidental. The message is absolutely clear. So far, the expectation was that energy is not, is not geopolitics, at least in the capitals of the member states. But how do you? What is your reading on that kind of development, where there is obviously the case that now Russia is trying to actually use energy as a geopolitical weapon? The gas reserves are more or less empty. So in a sense, Gazprom wasn't delivering, in the previous months, knowing that political leaders will be put under pressure by their citizens. What is your reading? Where is exactly the truth in this kind of
the thing with the Nordstrom II, I mean, Russia's own supplies were depleted, and Russia's always going to take care of Russia first. So, the last couple months they were refilling, their stocks that needed to. The interesting thing is that they said that they were done, and then for next month, they're still not increasing supplies to Europe, even though that they said that it would be possible and they wouldn't be able to, and then you kind of have to bring Poland into this whole issue, because Poland is absolutely against Nordstream 2. Right. And so, it's a big, it's a big political problem, not just between, say, Russia and Germany, but, Russia and Poland, a lot of EU member states. And approving this Nordstream 2 not only takes Germany to approve it, but then it needs to go to the EU for approval. Right. So, there's a lot of red tape there.
Yes, but interestingly, this is not a European Union issue. The European Union was clear on the matter that, in fact, it will threaten the energy security, the European energy security, by increasing the dependence on one energy supplier. And as you noted, in fact, you could diversify. You named, for instance, Qatar, Qatari LNG, right? And Turkey is a perfect example for a smart regional actor in that specific domain, because they have diversified. They have, of course, energy supplies from Russia, but they also receive LNG from Qatar. So they have basically a diversified energy portfolio from 3-4 different sources. So in a sense, you cannot be blackmailed by one single energy supplier.
Yeah, and I mean, you can also get gas from Israel through TAP up through Greece, right? So, there are a lot of regional players there that the EU could reach out to. But the focus right now is obviously on Russia.
Yes, and since you mentioned, of course, Poland, yes, Poland is probably the rebel, the small rebel in the European Union family, which has, in fact, sought to diversify via American LNG. So they have now the opportunity also to receive American LNG, and in a sense, this is one way how to actually do it, because then you have much more space to maneuver and to not get blackmailed. But do you think that, of course, United States is a completely different story. We discussed this also last year. United States is meanwhile in the situation that they can also export energy, so they are not really dependent to this kind of great extent on energy supplies as it was in the past, which is why also their focus has been shifting away from the Middle East, right? This is not coincidental that now the focus is being put to other regions, specifically Indo-Pacific. Do you think that Europe's energy crisis is a preview of an upcoming America's crisis, energy crisis?
Well, I think that depends on, so far the energy policy is not as aggressive in the United States as it is in Europe towards energy transition, right? Because it kind of operates on a different level, right? Not because we have oil lobbyists, we don't have a national oil company per se, right? So United States kind of operates on a completely different level. I think I think we'll see intermittent problems, right? Just like we saw in Texas and we're seeing in California. So we'll probably see problems in states that get too aggressive. Not that Texas is too aggressive. That was a completely different issue. But some of these more progressive states might start to have issues. So I think really, instead of being really a national problem, I think we're going to see it more of a localized problem, right? Because you just, when you're canceling pipelines and things like that, like New Jersey wouldn't let the pipeline be built, so their natural gas prices this winter will probably be sky high. So it's going to be more regionally and locally in the United States, and that's kind of where it differs from the EU.
Are we going to witness a further cancellation of pipelines? I mean, obviously, the case with the Keystone pipeline was not the smartest move, right?
Right. No.
Maybe maybe in terms of timing. I mean, even if they had decided to do it, maybe the timing was not really the most fortunate one.
Right.
So do you think we are going to win, or is it going to be a local problem, as you said? I mean, specific states are going to address the issue in that way, and other states are going to be more robust in their energy policy, in a sense, trying to be more to be smarter in terms of how to transition.
Yeah, I think it'll be more local. I think I think this administration now, they just came out and said, we have a problem moving, oil and gas around the country, around North America, right? So then stop canceling pipelines. So hopefully they'll address that issue and kind of be on the forefront. I mean, I hope that they are looking at what's happening in Europe, and will try to avoid that similar situation on a national level. Then again, it will be individual states that are probably going to have, some issues depending on how progressive they are in pursuing a green agenda without the underlying technology there, right? Because really, what it's going to take for all of these countries, you're going to have to redo the entire grid, right? So you can't just take new energy, put it on top of an old grid. It's kind of like putting new code on top of old code and expecting your website to run well, right? So really, all of these power grids, in order to be able to handle this kind of electric moving over to EVs and things of this nature, and integrating renewables into the power grid, we're going to need a complete overhaul, because right now there's just no way you could 50% of your vehicles by 2035 in the United States to be electric. The power grid would literally fold,
blow off, basically.
So and then the same thing with UK. They have an aging power power grid as well. So, and then there lies the secondary problem on that. It's that nobody wants to spend the money to do that, right? Then you got, so
there is no money for that. I mean,
right.
if you look at all the infrastructure plans, right? I mean, this was a problem that was addressed during the Trump's administration. If you remember, when he was giving the example of China's Belt and Road initiative, which was meant to amount for 2 to 3 trillion of US dollars. And then there was the case, why do we not invest in our own infrastructure? Let's have a 1 trillion infrastructure kind of program for the United States, if I remember correctly. So in a sense, nobody, neither in United States nor in Europe, I mean, the governments have been spending like hell during the last almost 2 years of COVID-19 crisis. And in a sense, who is going to spend so much money on new infrastructure, as you say, in order to build actually the power grid, to prepare the whole necessary networks for, for this transition?
And the transition, I mean, I think the latest figures out on how much this would cost, if this global transition is $150 trillion. $150 trillion for this plan to go to fruition. Nobody has that kind of money right now.
Where is the money coming from?
I mean, exactly. Or, can't. So this is where we have a problem with these aggressive goals.
I mean, if we look at all these kind of papers that have been coming out regularly, I mean, they hide the potential for some trillions of hidden, right. which will never be used, of course, as we know. And the other option would be to tax the middle class. Working class is more or less has been struggling for quite some time, and now has been hard hit by the COVID-19 crisis. And now the middle class is basically going to somehow cover or at least a share of the price for this transition by by witnessing more taxes, right? Linked to the green transitioning. So in a sense, 150 trillion would also mean a new kind of indebtedness, because nobody can afford actually this price.
Oh, absolutely. And they've done studies in the United States. I think the Washington Post or somebody did a poll, and basically, overwhelmingly people were all for green energy. However, nobody wanted to spend more than $24 a month for it. So there we have a problem. And I'm sure that, that's not just prevalent in the United States. I'm sure if you did a poll, you would find the same answers from, sort of the middle classes, that we just can't,
yes,
we just don't want to pay for it. So we run into problems there as well.
Well, on the one side, if we take into consideration the surging energy bills, which will of course affect families, affect households, but will also affect whom? Small, medium enterprises,
exactly,
which of course depend on energy bills.
Exactly,
right?
Exactly. And they've already been hard hit, over
already. Exactly. So
it's gonna this green, COP26 is not, I think they're gonna have a lot of problems. I mean, already going into this, Xi is not showing up himself. Putin's not showing up himself. He's going to do it remotely. And we're still waiting on India to hear if they're going to come. So you can't have the top three energy consumers in Asia not be there, right? And the top three companies that are the top three countries that we're expected to see the most growth in fossil fuels, right? So it says something very loudly that they're almost absent.
Which also brings me to the point that the so-called forcing greening of the global economy is not realistic in the short term, definitely not by 2030, if at all. And if we are talking about greening of global economy, we actually mean specific parts of the globe, because large parts of the world cannot afford themselves a greening of the global or regional economy, cannot afford themselves decarbonization for the moment. Is it a kind of a correct wrap-up?
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
So can, for instance, nuclear energy play a bigger role in these considerations, at least for the transitionary period? Just to give you one example, France has launched an alliance with other European countries to push for including nuclear energy as part of the diversification portfolio towards the greening of the European economy. While, for instance, countries such as Germany and Austria are vehemently against nuclear energy. They are absolutely 100% against it. So in a sense, I'm already seeing the next big crisis that is going to emerge here within the European Union family. I don't know how it is, how the case is in the United States, but do you think that this might be also one way how to diversify in the
Well,
future?
absolutely. And I think we're sort of seeing in the short term, Germany just announced that they're delaying the closure of their last nuclear plants. We also saw in the United States, Illinois decided not to close 3 nuclear plants. What's interesting is we did see the UK just lay out a plan for nuclear. Right. And they want to really aggressively add that into their power mix. So, we're perhaps other countries will kind of look at that model and change their mind. I mean, France has always been very pro nuclear. But yes, I mean, you're always going to have a problem with, say, Austria and Germany. So it depends on how much they sort of push back against that. But, we're also seeing growth, not, kind of a turnaround in the West, right? That was put off by nuclear after Fukushima, but we're kind of seeing a turnaround, in Europe and the US. But, we definitely are seeing major growth in, in Asia, in India, for example, and Bangladesh and China. Those are where most of the new projects are kind of, already past the planning stage of the pipeline.
Mm-hmm. So I want to shift your focus on the geopolitics of energy, as I know that you have also background in international relations and political science. So in a sense, you have also quite of a big interest in geopolitical developments, and they are very often related to energy. So from a geopolitical point of view, my expectation is that the new great game is going to be predominantly situated in the South China Sea and in the Indian Ocean, due to the rising competition between China and India. Of course, in addition to the systemic rivalry between China and the United States. So my question to you is, are we going to witness also military conflicts or energy-related conflicts in that parts of the world, or do you have a specific anticipation for other potential energy-related conflicts post 2021 when it comes to the geopolitical developments affecting global energy?
Well, I don't think
system?
that, I don't think we're going to see, say, a military conflict between, China and the United States, per se. I think you have the potential, in the South China Sea or, anywhere around that area. I think we'll probably continue to see the same kind of skirmishes that we've been seeing, the Philippines, Taiwan. But I don't think that this is going to escalate into, an all-out war. At least I hope not. But I just don't, or escalate into a hot war. Let's put it that way. It's already kind of a Cold War. Then the other area that always you need to look at is Greece, Cyprus, and Turkey. right? You have Turkey that just bought that S-400 from Russia, who wants to buy some more. You had Greece just announced they're buying 6 more Rafales from France. So that's an area to watch because they both seem to be gearing up militarily. Do I think that it will end up in a hot war? Probably not, but it's still an area that is definitely worth watching, especially because that area is a gas feed into Europe. So kind of definitely want to watch that. Obviously Nordstrom II, and then Poland versus the EU is also another very interesting dynamic.
Pole exit, so to say.
Pole exit, yes. To be watching. They just stood up to the EU on coal and said, no, we're not getting rid of our coal, and no, we're not paying your fine. They're against Nordstrom II, so that's a very interesting. I don't think that Poland will necessarily leave the EU, but they are going to be kind of a thorn in the side of this energy transition plan and Nordstrom II approval.
Oh, absolutely. And maybe then also for those who are not familiar with the South China Sea issue, that there are definitely disputes that are going to further escalate between China on the one side and Chinese neighbors on the other side. And also in the South China Sea holds about 11 billion barrels of oil and 190 trillion cubic feet of natural gas, according to the US Energy Information Administration. So in a sense, even though that it is being presented as a territorial dispute, I still do think that there are also certain calculations behind it, because China, if it is really en route to becoming a kind of a regional center of power, challenging the US dominance in this part of the world, they would definitely need to become more independent in the energy sector. And that would also mean that they would actually strive for their own, for control over their own reserves.
Oh, maybe. Absolutely. And that's what China's been about. I mean, that's what Belt Road Initiative is about. I mean, they're all about gathering, natural resources, food, energy, metals, minerals, etc. So, if you kind of look at everything they've done, it's, there's been some sort of, natural resource, agriculture, metals motive behind that.
So we should definitely keep an eye on that as well, right? Because right now with following the takeover, the Taliban takeover in Afghanistan, following the US withdrawal, they probably will be the next Iran for China to step in, to try to take control over the situation via political channels, but then also probably to explore and exploit, as you mentioned, for instance, that certain copper mines or mineral reserves.
Right. I mean, Afghanistan's sitting on trillions worth of minerals and rare earths. So, obviously, as soon as the US left, China and Russia kind of quick to swoop in there.
Yes, definitely. So geopolitics of energy is here to stay as well. We are going to observe, yes, I would agree with you, not a direct military conflict between China and United States, more likely probably be direct military conflict, at least with a limited scope in terms of skirmishes between China and India. And I would like to move to your personal prognosis and basically your personal assessment regarding the next year. Last year, you gave some really great tips regarding specific companies to look, to pay attention to carefully observe. And what are your favorites right now when it comes? I'm sure that there will be also people who are either traders or are really following commodities, energy stocks because of professional interest. So in a sense, maybe we can give also some insights. All of your great insights from last year, I can only confirm I can only confirm that all of them were absolutely spot on. This is something I can personally confirm because I not only verified, but in a sense, I just followed your advice, and it turned to be a great, really great assessment on the current situation as of 2020. So, do you have new favorites or any, special kind of probably hidden tips that?
Well,
yeah.
I think right now, last year was more focused on oil. So this year definitely more focused on that natural gas, and LNG. So I would look at companies like Delek in Israel on the Tel Aviv exchange, CVX Chevron is also very active in that area. Plus they're an integrated, which, I like for a bigger player. In the United States, I like Antero Resources. I also think that at least right now in the interim, we have products that are really strong right now. The crack spreads are very strong right now, and refiners are coming off maintenance season. So refiners like MPC, VLO, and PSX, I think over the next few months at least will do really, really well. So I guess that's kind of what I'm.
That's more than enough, actually.
What I'm looking at right
I
now.
remember we really covered more oil last year, but now with the shift becoming very obvious towards growing interest in gas, natural gas, LNG, that makes perfect sense that you are more focusing also on that particular sector. So given that we are definitely going to meet not late than a year again, so what do you think is going to be the topic that is definitely more or less going to stay on the agenda for the 2022 talk? Energy crisis?
Energy crisis. I think we're going to still be talking about fossil fuels. I think just because I just don't see the technology advancing that quickly over the next 2-3 years to make a huge change. And so I think we're going to continue to see sort of demand outstrip supply, because really, if you look, oil and gas industry has had barely any capital expenditure over the last 7 years, and projects other than shale, if you're talking deep water or things of that nature, those projects take 8 to 10 years to come to fruition, from highly discovered oil to we can actually produce it. Countries that produce something like shale, you can get those projects off the ground much more quickly. The problem is that nobody wants to do that because investors are shying away from the sector. And so in order to entice investors, operators have had to focus on dividends and stock buybacks and making sure they had enough free cash flow to entice investors to kind of stay in the industry. So they've been very apprehensive to go all out and start producing again. So and I don't really see that changing over the next year.
Mm-hmm. But would that mean that inflation is also here to stay? Because we are being told that inflation is
transitory.
Transitory. But in a sense, given that your anticipation is that the energy crisis is here to stay, probably we are going to witness different cycles of it, right. But more or less, it's going to be to remain, will be long long term.
Right.
So this, of course, will affect.
This affects other industries too,
yes,
right?
exactly.
So, if you're talking about, we just saw in the UK, we had the secondary effects where fertilizer producers couldn't produce because it was costing too much money. Then you have a tertiary effect where meat packers can't get CO2 from the fertilizer companies to pack meat. So, this is the energy is basically everything.
It's everything. Yes, you can
moves,
say it. A lot of people underestimate the fact
it
that
moves everything, right? And so if you have higher energy prices, that's going to equate to higher food prices, higher this price. So I don't really see in the short term, I don't really see inflation as transitory.
It's transitory. So the main official narrative that this is just caused by the higher demand following the higher consumption, because now we are no longer in lockdown situations in most parts of the world, is in fact not really not really the whole representing the whole truth. In a sense, if we remain in a scenario of a longer lasting energy crisis with surging prices, which I also think is going to be the case, because you cannot go backwards right now. You cannot once you are in the middle of it, once you have launched, because a lot of this is also due to political decisions. By people who are not energy experts, who do not have an idea about the energy sector, or the second order effects that might be caused by sudden shifts or transitions. I see that we are having some questions. Do you have maybe 5 more minutes?
Okay.
Yes, maybe we can address some of them. So there is a question by Giovanni, whom we know, both of us, we know him. So he said, he asks, can it be said that the real difference between the European Union and China is really that the European Union authorities seem inclined to pay whatever price in monetary and productivity terms to get renewables? So is it really whatever it takes kind of mentality just to introduce, for the sake of introducing renewables?
Yes, I think it's I think they're very stubborn, and that's kind of causing the problem. So yes, I'd say some of the obstinance, like, we're going to get this plan done, we don't really care, but still without foresight of, it's kind of unreal to me that the people that made these energy policies had no foresight looking into this. So at whatever cost, we're going to get this done, but now here's the cost, right? And so, it will be interesting to see if they sort of, like, I'm very looking forward to COP26, because I think what's going to happen is they're going to make a lot of sacrifices on their Green New Deal in order to just move forward. I think I watch what they do about coal. I think that's going to be a huge issue. Natural gas will be a huge issue. But I think that they're definitely not going to get done what they want to get done during this meeting, and that I would look for a lot of sacrifices that they make to their plan.
Yeah, for the sake of sticking to the narrative, because you cannot, once the narrative has been pushed, you cannot go backwards, right? Politically, I mean, the price will be too high. But one interesting thing is actually, because you mentioned coal, we didn't talk about coal, but because coal is, of course, no-go in all these energy transition plans. But in reality, scenario outlook by many of these by many of the relevant international regional organizations include a surge in the coal production as well, right? Could you confirm? I think this is going to be interesting for the audience to know that coal is not going away, because many specifically many economies cannot afford other sources of energy.
I mean,
specifically for manufacturing and for electricity and whatever.
Yeah, I mean, you've seen steep declines in the U.S. And some steep declines in most European countries, right? But the world, that's not the case in that's not the case in Asia. That's not the case in Africa necessarily. It's not the case in South America.
Mm-hmm. There is a question about hydrogen. We didn't talk about hydrogen, and the question is, what are your thoughts on hydrogen, regardless of color, and its role in the future energy system? And there is even a second one. I will just read it, also regarding green hydrogen. Is it a good bet right now? Why go through battery transition when heavy vehicles and aeroplanes will anyway be transitioning to that? What is your take?
I think right now green hydrogen's way too expensive, and it's not ready. It's too expensive to be commercially viable at this juncture. I think when you look at, I think there's opportunities investment wise when you want to start looking at blue hydrogen. And the thing is with blue hydrogen is that it's mixed with natural gas, and they can flow it through existing pipelines. Right. So I think in the near term, that's a lot more viable than the green hydrogen.
And I can confirm that there is a lot of interest by governments in hydrogen, but whether this is going to be translated into concrete political decisions, I cannot say as of now. And this is definitely now in this phase of checking and costs calculation and so on. There is a question on Bitcoin. Should I?
Bitcoin. Okay.
Yes.
I don't know if I'm the one to answer this, but okay.
I would like to know Tracy's opinion if Bitcoin plays a role or will play a role in the current macroeconomic energy chessboard. That means countries leveraging their energy resources for mining, etc. What's your take?
What I think is, let me skew it to something that I do know about on that. I think really what you're seeing now is what's really interesting is using flared gas for Bitcoin mining. Instead of flaring the gas, they're using waste natural gas for Bitcoin mining, which I think is very interesting. And so you could look at other technologies such as carbon capture. Can you capture carbon and also use that for Bitcoin mining as a power source? So that's kind of where I find that whole sector very interesting.
Mm-hmm. Yes, and if I'm not wrong, the mining industry, Bitcoin mining industry, has moved now to the United States, right? I mean,
yes,
after China banned mining in Bitcoin in China, which was the more or less the oasis for Bitcoin mining. Now they moved actually back to the United States. There were some also speculations that they are going to look for places such as Ireland, I think it was Baltic states or Iceland. I'm not sure anymore, but in a sense, looking also for other sources such as renewables, wind, whatever. But definitely Bitcoin has a major energy issues when it comes to, basically mining it. So in a sense, I don't think this is going to be solved in the future that easily. There is a comment basically pointing to the IMF estimates. I don't know whether IMF is really the right the right organization to quote, given that they haven't been really correct with their economic growth outlook. I think in any single year, but okay. IMF estimates that the global fossil fuels subsidies, direct and indirect, at 5.9, so basically almost trillion in 2020. So these are the subsidies, right? Direct and indirect. While the International Energy Agency's net zero roadmap projects 5 trillion of energy investments per year would be necessary by 2030. So the question is, isn't the money just in the wrong places?
I don't necessarily think that's true. And you're taking both of those organizations have their own agenda. Like IMF has their own agenda. IEA has an unrealistic agenda as far as the transition, if you actually read their paper. So no, I don't think the I don't think the money is in the wrong places, and I wouldn't necessarily sort of count on the figures from either one of those.
Specifically, yes, the IEA has such positive scenarios, right? This is what you mean. Yeah. No, for those who haven't read the outlook scenarios, they have such a positive outlook for specifically net zero, right? This is what you mean.
It's unrealistic.
Unrealistic, yes, exactly. Well, I think that I don't want to keep you too long because I know you're very, very busy. You stayed with us for more than 60 minutes. And the questions that we could not address, we can address. You can reach out to Tracy. She's available on Twitter. She's very active. She participates in a lot of Twitter space discussions, or you can just reach out to her and send her a message if you want to ask her something. Tracy, thank you very, very much for your insights, your analysis, your assessments. I will carefully look at all your suggestions regarding natural gas and LNG. I will give you feedback in a year as of now. But in a sense, I am afraid that we are going to have a similar conversation next year, and we are going to be stuck in a kind of a limbo when it comes to energy, and specifically, energy crisis around the globe. So in a sense, you're going to be very busy. I'm going to be very busy covering the geopolitical side. And I wish you a pleasant weekend. And
you too.
Thank you for tuning in during the live stream, and thank you for listening and watching.